to be done in order to return Eskom to the best performance it has had in its past. I just want to make 10 key points. Firstly, it is that, and all 10 are important programs, not necessarily exclusive or totally inclusive, that have been running during the last couple of years post the state capture period. None of them is going to be interrupted in any way, or stopped in any way, or diverted in any way. So the first is that the recovery from state capture and the combating of corruption in whatever form we find it, both as a consequence of state capture, but also as a consequence of the current attempts by syndicates and groups of people who want to subvert the operations of Eskom and its normal governance processes so that they can fill their bank accounts and their pockets, is going to stop. That fight against corruption, as we've seen recently with the concessions made by global firms like ABB, over and above the 1.5 billion rands that was paid directly to Eskom, they've also now paid another 2.5 billion rands to the let's call it the anti-corruption fund. The second is that post the end of 2019, early 2020, just before the COVID pandemic seized life in most parts of the world, the Eskom roadmap began to be implemented, and what we today call unbundling or restructuring of Eskom, with the first output being the creation of the transmission company. That will continue. The new board will apply its mind to once again review the names that we originally had for the transmission board and ensure that we have the right skills mix, which I was not happy with in the previous names. And sooner rather than later, that new board will be in place. And similarly, there will be efforts to ensure that other components of Eskom that are due for restructuring stroke unbundling follow suit as well. The third is in relation to the current generation plant, and in this particular instance, it's important that we now, under the guidance of the new board and the team of engineers that we have on that board, and others that have been commandeered from the, let's call it the convocation of people who were at Eskom for a period of 20 or 30 years, must together implement radical changes to the generation output, building on what we've done so far. But there's no doubt that the country is frustrated with the levels of load shedding, that we need to actually do much better to ensure that normal life returns to South Africa sooner rather than later, and that we contribute as Eskom to the pronouncements that the President made on the 25th of July, where the stopping of load shedding and the better performance from the generation plant were amongst the first of the items that were on the list of to-dos. The fourth is efforts to introduce more and more megawatts into the generation system must continue, and our sister department, the Minerals and Energy Department and NERSA, must begin to do some extraordinary things to cut further red tape, make it easier for people to invest in new plants, whether in whatever form they appear, solar, wind, battery, pump stations, or even gas, so that we have the kind of energy security that our economy and our society actually need and want. Without the addition of those additional megawatts, which Andre himself pointed to early in 2020 when we spoke about a deficit of 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts, about which very little has actually happened. Our attention needs to be drawn once again to ensuring that there's a faster process at play, including the kind of creative initiatives that was taken by Eskom under the leadership of Andre in making land available around the current power station. So that's the fourth element. The fifth is that the Minister of Finance has indicated his commitment to take a, let's call it, significant part of the debt of Eskom onto the sovereign balance sheet. Work in that particular regard will continue, and under his watch, the necessary announcements will be made in February next year when he delivers his budget address. So we want to assure all investors who are invested in debt of some 300 billion rands to Eskom itself that, if you like, their money is safe, that the manner in which the board will guide Eskom through the coming transition from the current executives to the new executives is one that will happen in a responsible way, one that will take into account the interest of all the parties concerned. And if anybody has any doubts, you're welcome to reach out to us, either at a ministry level or at a board level, so that we can understand your concerns and respond to them. That's the fifth. The sixth, as the chair mentioned, the country's commitment is not just Eskom's commitment. The country's commitment to meeting the nationally determined contribution, which was put to COP26 and reaffirmed at COP27, and the plans that were developed under Andre's leadership in relation to the just energy transition remain in place, will continue to be implemented, and the first changes as far as Komati Power Station is concerned, which is, if you like, not just a national flagship, but a global flagship, will continue to happen at pace in terms of the original plan. And this is the commitment that the South African government has given to various parties who have been supportive of South Africa's efforts in this particular regard. Seven, there's no doubt, as has been pointed out, that the people factor within Eskom is absolutely key. In addition to the extremely skilled and faithful people that we've had within Eskom itself, we need to add more skills, we need to ensure greater integrity, and we need to ensure that everybody works towards one common national purpose. There are still termites within the system who want to undermine the efforts of people who want to do good by this country. And in time, the law enforcement agencies will identify those termites and ensure that they find their rightful place in orange uniforms at a faster rate than the current law enforcement efforts have actually seen. But bringing in skills and encouraging people to improve their skills is a crucial part of what we're doing. 8, as part of the people factor and skills development, is to reintroduce the engineering discipline within the power stations. And again, I think there are thousands of people who are working at the Eskom power stations and in the new renewables industry who want to ensure the right engineering discipline begins to emerge above the lackadaisicalness that might have crept in certain regards as well. So the employees at Eskom have a formidable task ahead of them in that particular regard. Finally, I want to pay tribute to Andre and his family for having made the choice, but also the sacrifices that he has made by taking a huge step and crossing the line from the private sector to the public sector. And by his own admission, there are many things that worked well and many things that still need to be done. And in that particular regard, his humility in accepting that more work needs to be done, but at the same time, he can spend time with his family, being rest assured that he's given his all to this particular important national project. To all the employees within Eskom itself, now is the time for you to stand up against corruption. Now is the time for you to back South Africa as a country. Now is the time for us to recognize that we work for the 60 million people in South Africa, not just for ourselves and not just for our pockets. And don't be tempted by bribes. Don't be tempted by the handouts that people are willing to offer in order that they, in fact, get a lot more into their bank accounts than you ever will. So the honest people within Eskom need to now stand up and take the fight to the corrupt in whatever way possible, so that Eskom once again does return to its pride of place within the South African SOEs. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Thank you.